Hi guys, this is Tabitha Cerberus here with a new video. In this video, I'm making a cosplay for my friend Brittany in Texas. She had this beautiful idea to take Victor from Yuri and Ice and combine it with the Greatest Showman. She worked with an artist who designed the costume to her criteria, and then Brittany sent me the artwork. The artist put it in 3 different layers so that I could have an idea of what I needed to do to make this costume. The first step was I created a mock up using some muslin and some plain white 4-way stretch fabric. Um, on the white fabric that was 4-way stretch, I did just simple lines so that Brittany would have an idea of where things would be placed. And I sent her the mock up. The mock up fit perfectly on her. And so she kept the mock up because I didn't need it anymore because I had the muslin copy. And so here I'm now cutting out all the pieces I need to make this cosplay. And I used fabric from Spandex World. I ended up having to get several different samples, which I love that Spandex World does this. Because I couldn't tell the differences between the different pinks on the website. So it's always a great idea to like buy samples so you have an idea of what you like. So once I decided which pinks I like, and I also sent Brittany the different nudes because she's African American, so I couldn't figure out which of the darker skin tone netting would fit her. And once we figured out which one fit her, uh, I bought all the supplies. It was wonderful, and it's perfect. The color matched her skin tone, and it just made me really happy that she was happy, and I was able to do all the ordering. The only downside was I think I bought the ombre and I didn't realize that the ombre that I'm using for the arms um, and part of the torso, the color doesn't go all the way through the netting, so it's kind of like plain on one side almost. It still worked. Um, and the parts that's on the arms, it's going to be very drapey, so you won't even notice like how different it is. Another thing we had to do was make sure that the uh, the fabric that I did pick up from Spandex World was thick enough. Because once it's stretched, certain stretched fabrics, when stretched, get really thin and you can see through things. All the fabric I picked were very thick spandex, so even though it's stretched over the body, you could not see through it. It was wonderful, and it was very fun to work with. This is the ombre I was talking about. It is beautiful on one side, but if you flip it on the other, it's kind of like very plain. You don't see the color all the way through. But it still worked as I liked it to. Now, I'm currently in a new location, so this took me about a year to make. Um, because I work full time. Um, I also run an Etsy shop, so I can only do so much, and that's why it took me some time to complete this project. So about a year ago, I was in the apartments, and then I was in a house rental, and then I gave her this cosplay back in January when I went to IkiCon, and I got to see her wear it, and it looks so good on her. Um, so this part of the cosplay I'm working on is the chest piece and the back pieces. I was just making sure everything fit. Um, I'm also layering it because if you look at Victor from Yuri on Ice, he has an ombre going on his costume, and I'll put a photo so you can actually see what Victor looks like from Yuri on Ice and the outfit we're uh, using to combine with the Greatest Showman. So with these pieces, I flatlined them because I didn't want them to move. Flat lining is really easy. You can do this with lining. I do this with whenever I'm layering fabrics so that they stay in one place. A lot of this project was flatlining to make sure nothing moved, nothing was in the wrong spot. I flatlined the black part of the front piece as well. I know you're going to be like, what about the top stitching? Isn't that going to be noticeable? I'm going to be adding trim to this later. So much trim and so much rhinestones that you won't even see a lot of the top stitching in this costume. I also used a stitch method that isn't the zigzag stitch. I did use the zigzag stitch on the side seams and such, but when I was top stitching certain areas, I use I believe it's 2 forward, 1 back stitch. I could be calling that wrong. But it's a type of straight stitch that when done, it's actually stretchy, but it looks straight. And I use this a lot in this cosplay for any top stitching I needed to do. But the rest of the seams I used a zigzag stitch. I think the hardest part about this cosplay was trying to make everything look even. Because I'm one of those people who is very nitpicky on how things look. So there's certain parts of this costume that I wish I could have done better, but that's just me being a little OCD. It just came out so perfectly with the different textures of fabric, because I used some solid spandex and then some shiny spandex. And then I used the ombre pink over the light pink to get a darker pink and then the darker ombre look to it. It just came out so wonderful. So I'm gonna let this play through for a bit, and I'll intervene once in a while when I think I need to add something. So here I am doing the neckline using that nude mesh. So this is the part where I started using that beautiful like 2 forward, 1 back straight stitch. Because it's very hard to like have a nice clean edge and use a zigzag stitch. It just doesn't look good for like a top stitch. So I like this method. And as I said before, later on in the video, you'll see me hide most of these top stitching, which means I could have easily done a zigzag stitch since I'm covering it up, but I still wanted it to look nice. And here I am adding the beautiful stretch black trim that I bought off of AliExpress. I get a lot of my trim off of AliExpress. And this one was just really nice to work with, and it stretched really nicely, and Brittany loves her rhinestones, glitter, and frill. So I wanted to make sure I added the frill and added lots of rhinestones. But I know she likes frill a lot, so I wanted to make sure to emphasize tulle and like fluffiness to this cosplay. So once all of the trim was done, I worked on adding the nude backing to the back part like I did to the front, and then I sewed the shoulder and side seams together because I needed to work on the sleeves next. And the sleeves were going to be a little tricky because from the art we did, she was going to have some like bands and like cuffs, and I just needed to like figure out the placements these would be on the arms. And I guess I should have done that in the mock-up as well. But I was more worried about how it fit in the chest and hips and waist than I did the arms. Um, but it was kind of easy to do the sleeves. I thought it would be harder. I think the hardest part was when I added the trim because the trim was really thick. But doing the cuffs for the sleeves were really easy. I did the same overlay of the pink with the netting, and I used my own arm as a kind of reference point. Brittany has longer arms because she's a little taller than me, but that didn't really cause any problems. And then I figure out how far to put the band up. Now the tricky part was me trying to make sure everything matched when I sewed the seam line for the sleeves, because like sometimes I get off and it just looks awful. I used a beautiful white stretch lace again, but this one was different. This one had little pearl beads on it. I did have to like yank a few of these pearl beads off from where I was going to be stitching, because you always want to take off any pearls or rhinestones um, that are in the way of your seam allowance. One, to reduce bulk, and two, you really don't want your needle hitting any of those, because that will break, and that would be bad because you can really mess up with your sewing machine. So once I had to use like pliers to like take these pearls off the trim. Once again, I used that straight stitch method, the 2 forward, 1 back, um, to do the cuffs, to top stitch the cuffs down, and to put on the bands. Um, like I said, all of this was going to be hidden by the trim, anyways. Um, but I feel like this 2-step, 1-step back method, I feel like that's a little stronger than using a zigzag stitch. But I could be wrong. In personal experience, I felt like it was stronger. Like I didn't pull any threads um, when I used it in other projects. Now, sewing on the trim with the pearls was very difficult. I ended up using uh, different methods to try to like work around the pearls, and it was very tricky. I almost used, I believe, a invisible zipper foot to um, avoid the pearls, but I had to sew on either side of the trim to just to make sure it stayed put. Um, it just working with like sequence or pearled trim can be a little tricky. Um, I'm not a big fan of it unless it's like a bigger trim, then it's easier to work with. Now, the longest process was putting on the rhinestones. I used hot fix rhinestones, so that was a little easier. I also didn't know what to do because, like, I was trying to think, do I go with like a fancy method? I'm not a figure skater designer, so I don't know what their methods is on putting rhinestones on. Um, I wish I could get in their heads for like a day just to see what their methods are like. Um, I sadly did not put any videos of this in, um, but I did pearls, strings on one sleeve. It came out really pretty. They were very shiny, and she was very excited that they were all like, well, they were fake pearls, but she was very excited at how shiny those fake pearls were. In this clip, I'm working on the back bow. I will again show you the photo that I'm working with. Um, I feel like I could have done the bow a little bit better. I feel like I should have used stiffer interfacing for the bow. Because it's a little droopy. I wish I'd use a thicker interfacing to make it more plump and like fluffy. So if I could do one thing better on this cosplay, it would probably be the bow. But everything else came out really pretty, and it looks amazing on Brittany. So I'm very excited to see her wear this in person as a cosplay and not just her trying it on and make sure everything fits. Um, but yeah, in my opinion, if I could fix something about this cosplay, it would be the bow and maybe doing the rhinestones a little bit better. But I think that's just me not being very good at rhinestones. And here is Brittany trying on the cosplay for you guys.